see you guys in the dark.
It's been years since everything happened. We were kids then, but everything is still fresh in my mind as a now 20-year-old. So I was that weird kid. Goth, fat, band nerd, loved Invader Zim, MCR, chickens, just an easy target, I guess. But he was also part of this subgroup of alternative kids in the sea of angst and image issues that was middle school. We went to a school that was predominantly thug and gangster, but everyone seemed to be fairly calm and coexisted with each other very well. I wasn't able to fit in anywhere, not among the goth, emo, or the punk kids, not with the anime group, not with band kids either. I just never felt like I ticked enough boxes in one particular group to feel welcomed, or included enough to stay. For the first 2 years, I would sneak away during the lunch rush, and hide in the library when it was dead. I would read Goosebumps or R.L. Stine, Fear Street collection, or I would just hide away on the computer and print out coloring pages of GIR and just save them in a folder. After a while, the librarian kind of got the hint and just welcomed me every time I walked in and let me stay until the lunch bell. I didn't want to even remotely have the option of getting my tray of food and standing around awkwardly, looking for a place to sit when other kids robotically gravitate towards tables that they've claimed with their friends, not giving a second thought as to where they would have to go. I would even go so far as to have my parents drop me off at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning when my mom would drive to work. That was the time the custodians would do their walks, and they would see me and let me in so I wouldn't stay outside in the dark. Then I would wait by the band hall until my director showed up, and he would let me practice all morning until I have to leave around first period. All the kids standing around and mingling with each other while I just stood there with my backpack by the stairs. No one would even walk in my direction. That's just something that I didn't want to go through anymore. I just felt so lonely being surrounded by all these people, and it made me despise myself. What did I do wrong that just pushed people away so much? How did I come to be this person wallowing in self-sorrow so young? I really never got my answers. I guess peer influence is a worse thing than I imagined. That was just 3 years of my life, and how I experienced this time, and how already out of place I felt existing there. He was this real big dude. We'll call him Miles. Twice my height and weight, but was loud and cool. Was friends with all these older kids. So in turn, all the kids our age really liked being around him because he was so fucking neat. He liked cool punk music, listened to new hardcore music coming out like A Day to Remember and Comeback Kid. I remember the first time that I saw him. He was in the hallway talking to some kids I went to elementary school with, who also transferred to the same school as me. They all were wearing black shirts with Converse or Vans, and I thought that they looked so cool together. And as I walked past, I hear MCR. What a fucking poser. My face went beet red, and I just kept walking. I had saved up all my birthday money and gone to Hot Topic to buy some pins and patches I thought were cool to decorate my backpack with. I was just excited to express myself and the shit that I liked. That was our first encounter, and boy, was it grand. We had a few classes together, and I made sure to sit as far away from him or anyone else as humanly possible. I would have to brush past him occasionally, and tried to make myself as small as I could. I'd carry my backpack in front of me so that he wouldn't see my pins or my patches, or take the long way around if I heard him from a distance. But one day, I was walking to band, and I waved hi to a girl hanging around him who was always nice to me in elementary school. She smiled back as I waved. Then he looked at me and gets in front of my face, starts yelling at me, "Fucking emo kids! Fuck you! Fuck you!" as all the other kids laughed, even that girl that just smiled at me. And again I looked down and just kept walking past, as if I didn't hear him. As if he didn't just yell so loud in my face that he got spit on me. As if I wasn't just shaking in my skin because I was so scared. I had to wait to wipe the spit off of my face because I didn't want them to think that I was crying. So I walked to my next class with this guy's nasty bulldog slobber all over me, And then I went to band. And then I went home. Then it was a great day, Mom. I went to my room, locked my door. And that was the day that I started self-harm. I used the razors from my pencil sharpener. Stopped eating altogether until I got sick. Started wearing long sleeves all the time, even in the summer, to hide my cuts. And I just really changed. My entire mentality was ruined. And I couldn't even look people in the eyes anymore. So school is in full swing of things now. More projects, assignments, and concerts start to come up. We're all pretty overwhelmed. My social studies class had this particular project coming up where we had to buy a binder and designate it specifically for that project. We would do research over a certain historical figure of our choosing, print out articles or photos, write out notes, and just put everything in that binder, then keep it in a big bookcase in that classroom that was divided up by different periods and classes. And since I was in the library every day, I had the extra time to work on my projects, so my binder was getting really full. I tried doing my project over Mark Anthony, solely because I was going to make a joke about how funny it was that a singer had the same name as a figure of the Roman Republic. I had also finally convinced my mom to buy me one of those binders with the clear front pockets, so I could decorate it with pictures and cutouts of Gerard Way, Pete Wentz, J.T. Woodruff, Sinister Gates, and yes, of course, Gurr, and Minnie Moose. Every month when my mom got paid, she would buy me just one J14, Tiger Beat, or alternative press magazine of my choice. And from there I would cut out any pictures I thought were worth saving. Then I would staple them to my wall, or put them in my binder. As I worked so hard on that thing, it made me happy to see my little collage come together so that I could post it on MySpace and save it to my albums. Once the vanity portion was done, I was mostly done with my research and piecing together all of my information. There was maybe half a week left to go before the project was due. So I go home, return to school like normal, and then it's time for my social studies period again. I walk in the classroom, go straight to grab my binder to finish working on my project, and as I pull it from its spot, all my little pictures fall out. It's half the weight it was when I left it the day before. I turn it over to look. Someone had taken scissors and a Sharpie and cut up the front plastic pockets and my pictures. Then wrote poser, emo bitch, loser all over everything. Even worse, more than half of my project information was missing and completely lost. So I was just standing there, reading this with a shredded up binder, shaking and on the verge of tears. Embarrassed to hell because I'm too stupid to move, as other kids come and grab their binders and can clearly see mine. I sat there the entire class and tried to work with whatever I had left, which wasn't much. That day I decided to take my binder home and keep it in my possession at all times. I walked out of class after the bell rang, binder in my hands, and there he was, just standing there with a group of guys, seemingly waiting to see my reaction. And when I saw him, I just began to cry. I've never seen someone laugh as hard at someone else as he did that day. I never knew I could be so funny. He probably saw my Mark Anthony joke. That day I decided I was going to end my life. The more I sat and thought about it, the harder it got. What have I done to this guy to make him hate me so much? I couldn't even be around groups of people anymore because what if someone was his friend, and he had them come up to me, do or say something to me in front of all those other people just like he did? I just didn't want to chance anything anymore. I didn't want to live in fear, so I decided I'd rather not live at all. As I was writing out my letters to my family, I became more and more emotional. First the letter to my grandparents, then the one to my mom, and then I broke down in a sobbing mess when I started to think about my little sister and how she would grow up one day with this letter forever in her mind. And oh God, even worse. What if she was the one who found me bleeding to death and cold as sin? I couldn't handle the idea in my head. That's what stopped me, I think. My little sister saved my life without knowing it. She's 20 years old now, and I've still never told her. I'm just glad I didn't go through any of that. I told myself that I could push through the pain, and I would just keep cutting to put up with it. I swear that I could go on forever, about the times he put shit in my chairs, like the time that he put black paint on it, so that it would bleed in, and I wouldn't see it until after I sat and got back up, or even had other people put shit in my chairs. How he would brush past my shoulder with such strength that it knocked me back, or knocked my backpack off of my shoulders, ruining my stuff. Just made my life a complete nightmare. Just to turn around and want to fuck me in high school when I dropped all my weight. Got a little more cool and got over caring about what everyone else thought about me. Funny how that works, right? High school was fairly calm, and I could always avoid him. I always even ate lunch. I never had to deal with the same shit again, and I was glad. It had already ruined my sense of social safety and caused me so much pain. Fast forward, I had just turned 19. An ex-friend of mine tells me that he sees Miles on the corner of a gas station asking for change, that he looks horribly skinny and sick, kind of like an addict. For years I would pass by that area when I was around and try to see him. A fucked up part of me really needed to see him in that state. It's terrible, I know, but I just really wanted to witness this full circle of bullshit. But I never got around to it. He was never there when I passed by, so I just actually grew tired and gave up. Fast forward a few more years, and I find out that he's dead of a drug overdose. A friend of mine breaks the news to me. After a few seconds to process it, I can only say that it sucks, and she looks at me with the oddest face. I've never really told anyone about what he actually put me through, how it fucked with my head for years to come, how I experienced those 3 years of middle school fun. He was just too cool. No one could tell him shit because fuck them. He'd never listen. He always did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. He was too cool, and now he's dead because of his own choices. I went to read his online obituary, and read some of the people's comments about how big of a smile he had, how kind and warm he was, and how he was such a cool dude. Yeah, sure. I saw that big ol' smile the day that I thought I was going to kill myself. I noticed how warm he was when he got so close to my face. I could feel the heat of his breath as he yelled at me. Sure, he was cool, and now he's really cold. A part of me wants to feel bad, only because he was so young and wasted the opportunity of life that he was given. But a majority of me just doesn't care, and I'm still not sure if I should care or not. I had a dream about him recently, and that made me want to share my story. Finally, in my dream, he was just talking to me, and I was staring at him, but I couldn't speak. He was telling me about his car he found in a lot, and how he knew a guy who would design the hell out of it and turn it into one badass show car. I have no idea what that dream meant. But Miles, I really want you to stay out of my head forever. I grew up in a small, homophobic, and racist town in Alberta. So when I got the chance to go to the city and study, I took it. I'm living in residency with about 20 other girls. Most of them have become cliquey. And because I identify as a lesbian and my attire is goth, I was set apart instantly. But I found someone else who shares my love for cult horror movies and Hot Topic. I'll call her Nat for the story. A month ago, she and I had both just moved in, so we instantly connected since we were socially awkward and intimidated by all the preppy, thin blondes that seemed to dominate our residence housing. But Nat and I are really different too. While I hail from a severe medical condition that messes with my weight, Nat has diagnosed borderline personality disorder and often does risky things that I still have to pull her out of. The first time that I got her out of danger was probably the worst event that happened to me, and the riskiest. Nat and her boyfriend, Jay, are in an open relationship. It's not a bad thing at all. I think it's great, really. Initially, Nat decided she wanted to find a potential partner on Tinder. And yes, you can see where this is going already. She meets this guy, T, who is of Arabic heritage, dresses like a player, and initially talked sweet. Red flag number 1 happened when he asked her to meet at a nearby park off campus. I instantly felt a little unsure, so Jay and I tailed Nat to make sure she wouldn't get grabbed. About halfway there, the guy comes out and greets her with a big smile, and we're introduced. He acted nice, so none of my alarm bells went off. I thought I was being paranoid about the whole thing. Mistake number 1 happened when we let Nat be alone in her room with this guy. But before she went to see him, we agreed on a code word she would text or call Jay and I Peanut butter cups. Don't laugh. She mentioned she had a sweet tooth, and it was the first thing that I thought of. So Jay and I are downstairs in the common area. We hear a shout. We're unsure, and the Nat sends Jay a text. PB cups. Shit, we go upstairs. The guy is on her bed. Nat is sitting across from him with another girl in the room I didn't really know. I just knew that she lived down the hall. I asked Nat if she wanted the peanut butter cups I had in my room still, and she agreed. Jay staying in the room with the girl as we walked out. Once we were on my floor, I live upstairs from her. She told me he made her super uncomfortable, and to cover for her. Naturally, I agreed, so I go upstairs and tell the guy that Nat forgot some homework, and I had her textbooks, so she'd be busy for the rest of the night, and that he had to go. This guy was about 6'4". I stand on a good day at 5'5". Like I also mentioned, I have issues with my weight due to my disease, and I'm not physically fit as a result. This guy looked like he could bench press me. Mistake number 2 was that for a good 2 minutes, I was alone with him. We were walking up the steps to the automatically locking doors that led outside, and he asks me, "So do you want to fuck? Don't mind fat pussy?" Yeah, you see why Nat was scared? I only glared, said nothing until he got outside, and I had the automatically locking doors between him and I, and that's when I said it. If you ever come back here again, or I catch you doing this, I'll rip your fucking dick off. Now please note that when I say I am goth, I have full makeup on most of the time. That night I was trying out some new eyeshadow and wore full black lipstick. My blue eyes also stand out more, so imagine this chubby girl with full goth attire basically threatening a guy no more than 2 feet away, who could knock her out in a second, or worse. He took 2 steps back, looked at me as if I was going to make good on my threat. Then he called me a bitch. I called him a fucking animal, and I told him to leave before I made good on my threat. As he walked away, around the building, he muttered something about getting lucky. When I went back inside, after making sure that he left, Nat told me that when she was in her room, he tried to initiate sex. Of course she refused, since she didn't like doing it then, and he lunged. He pinned her to her bed and grabbed her chest and stuff. Luckily, the girl I mentioned heard the commotion and knocked. That made him get off of her and leave her alone. Also, this isn't the first time this guy has tried something on campus. Last year, he attempted to get a girl to go with him to his house, but she refused. He became violent, and campus security had to get involved, and he was escorted off the premises. We're all first years in this building, so we had no idea this was a thing that happened. Now the cops are looking for him since this is his second offense. They haven't caught him yet. He also took down his Tinder page before we could get his name. I'm very lucky that I wasn't hurt, because this guy was miraculously afraid of me. I got out with nothing but a small panic attack afterwards. Nat has to go to mandated therapy since her assault. Neither of us have or ever will use Tinder again. This may not seem like much to you, but again, this is the second time he's tried this, and he can get pretty violent. We also don't know if he was armed or not, and I was alone with him for a couple of minutes while I escorted him out of the building. So, if we ever meet again, I'll make sure that I'm good on my promise, and I'll call the cops first before I rip off your dick. This happened when I was 12 or 13, and in school. I was talkative and pretty dumb. We met at a library one day when I was looking for a book. He was probably around 15 or 16 years old. He was a tall guy, seemed very nice. We didn't talk much that day, and it's been so long I don't remember everything. He started showing up around me more at school. It was friendly, and I saw him staring when he thought that I wasn't paying any attention. He would follow me around at school. Our community center was for young kids to go hang out. Every Saturday, my friends and I would go play tennis or go play Pokemon. He shows up one day and just stares at me. He would hide behind stuff and listen to me talk with my friends, staying there and watching until the end. I was scared to go to the bathroom because I wasn't sure if he would grab me, and my friends knew and thought that it was funny. He was asked to leave, but he refused after being caught staring at a preteen girl. He never approached me, so I was wondering what his next move was. My friends dared me to walk up to him with black lipstick and eyeliner. I looked like the Joker. His face was priceless. Him and his friend laughed at me for like 5 minutes. He then said that he didn't like me anymore. That was my first conversation with him in months. He stopped showing up, and I wore black lipstick for years. I may have stopped dressing like an emo goth, but I still hope that I don't see you again. This happened over many months when I was 12, maybe 13 years old. During this, we were living in a quiet, little neighborhood in a college town. It was a very peaceful area, kind of in between the more upper-class neighborhoods and the city apartment campus part of town. I was homeschooled at this time, and combined with having been pulled out of public school by a single working parent who didn't take any time to think about it, meant that I didn't go to school in any way for a few years. And since I had no friends, I was either at home or exploring the endless labyrinth of yuppie houses about a block or two over with my headphones on, or being that annoying regular at the comic shop. During the relatively brief period that we lived here, we were in a house on a corner with a yard, and then a small ravine that was right behind us. On the other side were our only immediate neighbors. There was a single-parent household headed up by a very tiny, petite woman who had came off like one of those Midwestern sitcom type of moms. She happened to have a son who was 22 years old or so, and who we didn't see much of because he was taking a bunch of classes at one of the nearby colleges. There was also your typical gamer neckbeard 17-year-old, who we didn't see outside very much, and seemed to wear just Devil May Cry t-shirts. A goth daughter who, I assumed, was around 15 or so, based off of her appearance and her mannerisms. It didn't help much that she had an incredibly hot topic-y type of wardrobe, and often had that gothic Lolita look going on. They were pretty friendly, especially the mother. They were just kind of odd, but the longer that we lived next to them, the more that we realized something was kind of off with them. The mom had this cheerful, borderline creepy Stepford wife thing going on with her. It seemed like she never stopped smiling, whatsoever. 3 kids, however, were very often and rarely seemed to be in a good mood. Even when they seemed like they were trying to be friendly with people. It soon came into light why. Our houses were close together, with each of our kitchen side doors directly towards each other, across just a few feet of grass, divided by our short fence. I was home by myself quite often, especially during the summer vacation when my family was usually out doing things all day. I spent a lot of time watching TV in my living room, which was right off the kitchen. It was very common to hear the mother screaming insults at all of the kids. I'm not sure whether it was the proximity of the houses or the volume of her voice. A lot of the times I could even specifically make out all or most of what she was saying without even trying to eavesdrop on them. It usually seemed to be fairly trivial things, like forgetting to take out trash, or even playing video games before doing their homework. It seemed like the mother was aggressive, and the one screaming the loudest all the time. I told my mom about it once. It became a regular occurrence, and she said that she really wasn't surprised at all. She had coffee with the mother a few times, said that she was a very strange person, who had an abnormal tight grip on the kids. She says that the woman is concerned about all the weirdos out there, that she never trusted her kids to take the school bus. She would drive them to school, walk the hallways with them, and escort them all the way to the doorway of their class. This caused a lot of tension and frustration with the kids. She said that she tried to mom joke with her about how the kids just embarrassed by her parents, and tried to act like it was just normal, which creeped even my overprotective mother out, and it didn't stop there. They really weren't even allowed to take out the trash by themselves, to the big container that was just a few steps from the side door, without her watching the kids. Not even the guy in his 20s. Soon it started to make sense why the kids were very odd. Turned out the daughter was actually much older than we had thought. She was almost in her mid-20s or something like that. I might be exaggerating. Which all of a sudden made everything a lot weirder and creepier. Still, we kept a friendly relationship with them. Seemed to be on good terms with them. At some point, we started getting random doorbell rings. It was mostly during the day. There happened to be a group of college kids at the end of the block who would scream obscenities at me every single time we drove past on the street, and who constantly had the cops visiting them for things like drag racing. This continued for a little while. One night we also had cops knocking on the door, saying that they had gotten a noise complaint from this house. Funny thing is, we had been sitting quietly most of the evening. Other things started happening as well. Little unnerving things. One Friday, we set up flyers on our block, and also on a few surrounding ones, saying that we had a garage sale. The next day, all the ones on our block and the immediate vicinity had been torn off of the poles and ripped up, but not any of the various posters attached to any given pole. So we made more on Saturday morning, and then we decided to put those up as well. After taking a few hours of dragging things out of the garage, we went back to the street itself and noticed yet again all the flyers on the street had been ripped up, but only specifically ours. We were a little angry, but we really didn't pay any attention to it. By that point, my mom had finally realized that she couldn't be able to regularly afford rent to the house, so we decided that we were moving in a few weeks. We had just put up with everything for a little while longer. One day I was home alone. I heard a large vehicle pull up, and then our dog, who was tethered out front, started to freak out a little bit. I peeked out the front window, saw an animal control officer trying to slip the neck restraint around the dog and take her off the tether that we had. I went outside and asked her what she thought she was doing. She says that she got an anonymous call saying the dog had been out there for days, unsupervised, without food or water, which was bullshit. I called my mom. She comes home immediately while the animal control lady waits. By coincidence, it turns out that this lady is a high school friend of my mother's. They hug and talk a little bit before talking about the situation. The officer said that while she can't disclose the address of who made this complaint, she could tell us it was right on this street. She was motioning towards the house next door. We were confused, because aside from always being friendly with them, we would talk about dog stuff with them, since they owned a couple of dogs themselves. We didn't think that they would do such a thing, but again, we were moving soon. My mom decided not to bring it up with them. One day, close to our moving date, I had found a piece of paper that the daughter had written. It was one of her DeviantArt accounts, and checked it from the sheer boredom that I had. I had nothing to do all day. As I was expecting, there was a lot of bad sexualized furry art. I thought that I could find something else that was more entertaining. I clicked the link in her profile to her live journal. Aside from tons of entries of Slipknot and related pictures, lyrics, snippets, and bandfics, there was a lot of personal journal stuff that caught my eye, only because of the title of the one was My Asshole Neighbor. One of the links was something that I'll never forget. There was one about how animal control got called to her house to take her dogs, that the officer had told her it was because of us who had made the call, how she had this burning, violent hatred of us, and she wanted us to die. Since this was pre-social media, I guess she didn't think anyone would actually find this. Yeah, she gave us the DA account that it was linked from, but I guess being that this is still sort of when the internet wasn't exactly as widespread or important as it is today, it would still have been logical to assume that no one would find it. When I showed my mother, she called her friend at Animal Control. They told us that our dog was the first call that they've gotten on this street in many years. Aside from that, I was home all day watching TV right by the window on the day that she claimed that it had happened. I didn't see anything pull into the driveway at any point all day long. This was such a quiet neighborhood that even if I didn't see it, I would hear it, because it would be one of those big animal control trucks pulling into the driveway next door. There were many comments about people talking about how big of a piece of shit we were, telling her to do all these things, to terrorize and get revenge on all of us. Stuff like ringing the doorbell at many hours, then running away, calling the cops on them, giving us a taste of our own medicine. They went as far as to even tell them to call animal control. Many posts about suggesting that they stalk us, or break into our house. kidnap, kill our dog, or do even more rash things. Back then, laws like this weren't quite clear. At least to my mother it wasn't. She was afraid getting the law involved would make things much worse. She also had detailed physical descriptions of us in her post, about how much she hated us. My mom had decided to keep our mouths shut, move away as we had planned, which at this point was only a week later, and never see them ever again. That's exactly what we did. This whole thing still makes me feel uneasy, though. Like, what the hell is wrong with her? Why would she make a post like that when the shit that you're complaining about never even happened? Why follow revenge advice? You got nothing to avenge. I guess it hurt even more because I actually liked this girl. I kind of figured that we had common ground, even if she was unbalanced, as to do something like this in the first place. And seeing how things just kept escalating as they did, would anything have stopped her from doing something even more fucked up? It's kind of weird to think about, but yeah, I just really hope I don't ever see this girl ever again. I'm also hoping that one day she actually gets called on and gets some help, because she definitely needs some mental help. I live in Florida. I was a regular, and I was also a music broadcaster at a goth club in Tampa. The owner was the kind of guy who would love hanging out on the floor with the dancers. He would also dance and talk with all of his employees. One packed night, I was drinking straight from the bottle. My sister came running in from outside of the club. "Call 911," she shouted over whatever music was blaring over the radio that night. My sister, Jamie, happens to be a calm person, opposite to my more angry and direct personality. But she looked frightened and ready to cry her eyes out. "What's going on?" I asked her. "Someone might get shot. They got a gun pulled on them." I started running for the front doors, as I knew quite a few people who would be out there. Jamie held me back and yells, "No!" So I told her that I would just be fine, and I would find some place quiet so that I can call the police department. I decided to run into the back room, sit down in a chair, before dialing 911. "Hi, we need a police officer. Someone just pulled a gun on somebody outside of the castle, and we need an officer here now." "Where are you? Are you in a safe location?" she asked me. "Yeah, I'm sitting down inside of the building." While I was on the phone, people rushed in and tried to keep the door closed. We all stayed in the room and tried to be as quiet as humanly possible. Jamie was inside, and she told me she was outside with some friends, smoking, when she saw the gun being pulled. One friend was punched in the back, and then the gun was pulled. Everyone that could ran inside and locked the doors. None of us knew what to do. Someone pulled a gun on a random person outside of the club. What the fuck? It wasn't long before we heard shouting and gunshots. Eventually there was silence, and someone opened up the door. We thought everyone had gotten inside. One of the other employees, Joseph, was laid on the ground with blood pooled around him. The ambulance had arrived, and there were 4 paramedics. One of them had an oxygen tank, and some equipment to stop the bleeding. Many of the events that followed were a blur, as we watched Joseph being taken away. From many of the people that I talked to, the guy had said that he was here to kill some freaks. I enjoyed working there until Joseph was shot in the leg by whoever it was. In my regular life, I've always looked average. I'm small, with red hair and blue eyes. I had dyed my hair since I was a teenager. One time I had dyed it bright manic panic blue. But as much as I loved my goth nights, I also had a part-time day job working as a salesperson. On the weekends I wore all black and high spiked boots with a ton of makeup. During the week I wore blue jeans and a polo shirt with little to no makeup. The club wasn't just for goths. It also hosted other events like fantasy night and role-play nights. Because I loved it so much, I got a job working there some nights. One night the manager, Donald, summoned me to work a night that I was off to pour some liquor for some of the party goers. I wore a black dress, some slacks with a bright pink top. My hair was blown out, and makeup was subtle. Jamie wore her normal black trip pants and Marilyn Manson shirt that night. The night closed. We cleaned up, and I went outside with a green mohawked man. We stood and made small talk until a man had approached us. My heart pounded, but I wasn't sure why. He was probably about 5'10", short hair, and wearing a t-shirt, jeans, and sneakers. He was holding a bag from a taco restaurant down the road, and I was afraid of him. I wanted to run, but I was sure that would cause some kind of suspicion. "What's going on in there, then?" He pointed at the door. I exchanged glances with Jamie. "Nothing. We're just closing," Jamie had told him. "Oh yeah, it's one of those freak nights again, isn't it?" That's it, I thought to myself. He's the guy. I didn't see who shot my friend, but I knew that it had to be him. A freak night? What makes you call the people that come here freaks? Jamie looked at me and said to just go talk with the boss, hoping this guy would just stay calm and walk away knowing the owner was inside. I nodded, and Jamie stood by the door just in case the guy tried to follow. The man grinned at her. "Hey, did you hear what happened? A bunch of people got fucked with here a while back." She put out her cigarette, said, "Yeah, I heard that it was pretty awful." He smiled even broader, showing gaps in his front teeth. The boss opened up the door and ushered Jamie to get inside. Neither of us took our eyes off this guy until the door was shut. Everything about the situation and the guy seemed dangerous. "Oh, and I was there," he yelled, the last part. His knuckles white on his takeaway bag. His other hand was clenched. Rage filled his eyes, and his body was turning red. In one quick motion, we were both back inside. The doors had closed behind us. The man was pounding on them until he grew tired. Thankfully, he was not interested enough, or he was probably just too hungry to wait for us to go home. I don't know if the police ever investigated what happened, but Joseph never returned after having his gunshot wounds heal. As far as I know, nothing like it ever happened again, and the man didn't return during any of the other nights that I worked. This all happened when I was 15. I went out after school. I avoided being home. I left home before my mother got home and came back around dark. I had a cell phone, so I was let out of the house. I usually went to the local shop to draw or do some homework. I was there so much that they knew my order and the time to make it. I was the only goth kid, so I guess I was easy to remember. I was sitting by a window one day, and I see a man staring at me in the shop. He came up and asked me for a pencil. I gave him one and continued drawing. He eventually asks me if he can talk with me, and then sits down with me. I'm used to men doing this, and then walking off after I tell them my age. Not wanting to anger him, I agreed. He sat across from me, so I wasn't uncomfortable. He tells me that I am the most beautiful angel that he has ever seen. I laughed it off and wait for a moment so that I can tell him that I am a minor. "What is your name, and what do you do?" I asked him. He says that he is 23 and works at a convenience store. Then I tell him that I'm 15 and still in school. He looked surprised. I'm ready to leave because I figured that he would get up. Then he tells me that he remembers every outfit that I've worn since he first saw me 4 months ago. That's a lot of outfits, seeing as how I'm out daily. He tells me his favorite that I have worn. I walk, so I wasn't sure if he was stalking me. I was nervous at this idea and just wanted to leave. He makes small talk and flirts constantly, and then says, "Oh, I forgot that you're 15. You look so much older." I see it as almost dark, and I say that my mother needs me home now. He asks me to go with him and a friend to a park. I tell him that it's on the way home, but I can't go anywhere and must go straight home. One of these friends was in the shop far away, and this guy introduced me to him before I leave. When we get there, he tries to coax me into a dark section in the park. 2 adult men and 1 underage girl. No. I deny him the request and say no, but I believe that we will cross paths again. I'm almost away, and his friend catches up and asks if I want tacos, then shows me coupons for some free tacos. I couldn't believe that he tried to get me to say okay with free tacos. I tell him no, and finally get away. I made it home, changed my routine for a while. I did run into them a couple of times after that. This guy shows up in a van and offers to give me a ride. I was close to home and got away pretty quickly. I saw his friend a year later, and he struck up a random conversation with me. I'm much older now, and I've not seen them since then. I hope that they don't try that with another 15-year-old. That was lame that they tried to impress me with free tacos. This takes place in a fairly large city, roughly 8 or so years ago. I'm female, and at the time I was in my mid-20s. There used to be a gay bar that did goth night every Saturday night, and I would head out there fairly often with my friends. This night, there was a group of about 5 of us that went together. Plus, we always ran into more people we knew once we got there. At some point, I left my friends on the dance floor and went up to the bar to get another drink. It was pretty crowded, so the only space I could squeeze into was right next to some guy that was sitting on a bar stool at the very end of the counter. I ordered my drink, and he looked over and said hello. He had a pretty interesting accent, so I asked him where he was from. He replied that he was originally from Ethiopia. We made small talk as I was waiting for my drink, and I commented that I had a neighbor as a child that was from Ethiopia as well. The exact details of the conversation are a bit hazy. It was years ago after all, and to be fair, I wasn't paying super close attention at the time. So I'm not sure how the conversation went in this direction, but I do remember his words snapping my brain's focus back onto him. I killed people there. Oh, well, I awkwardly chuckled, thinking maybe this was just some weird drunk guy thinking that he would say some weird, creepy things to the goth girl at the bar. Maybe it was his really bad attempt at flirting. My drink arrived, and I remember stirring it, trying to ease my way out of the conversation. But I was still waiting for my change. You used to kill people, huh? He shook his head and replied casually, No, I still do. Uh-huh. My change would not arrive fast enough. I tried another awkward laugh and made some snarky comment about how I was fat, and if he tried to kill me, I'd fight back and just sit on him. I don't know. I had no idea what to say in this situation. Again, casually, without any emotion to his voice, he replied, There's no trying. If I decided to kill someone, I would. My change finally arrived, and I took my drink, which I had not let leave my hand or line of sight for an instant, excused myself, and headed back over to my friends on the dance floor. I watched as he turned on his stool so he could keep an eye on me. He just sat there, sipping his own drink, never looking away. Finally, at some point, I saw him put down his empty glass and move out the front door. I sighed in relief and continued to enjoy my night. Several hours later, the goth night was ended, and the next theme DJ was taking over. My friends and I are saying goodbye, and I started walking to the front door. I turned around to see my friend that had given me a ride was stuck in a conversation with another acquaintance, so I waited near the door, just inside the building. That's when he grabbed me. The guy from the bar dragged me in further, into a dark corner out of the line of the exit. I was in shock and couldn't make a sound at first as he pinned me to the wall, face pressed against it. He twisted one of my arms behind my back. It seemed like an eternity that he held me there, pushing himself up firmly behind me, almost like he was trying to hide me in even more shadows. There were no lights near us, and no reason anyone to walk by this corner. Even if I yelled, I wasn't sure if anyone would hear me since the DJ had started up. Somehow I managed to shove myself back against him once my fight instinct kicked in. In his surprise, his grip loosened just a bit, and the angle he held me at relaxed, and I managed to shove my fist up against his balls. I have no idea to this day how I actually bent myself around in just the right way, but he doubled over, and I ran. I grabbed my friend out of her conversation and breathlessly gave a Cliff Note version of what had happened as I dragged her to the back of the emergency exit. Before I could escape, I was stopped by security. He told me I couldn't go that way and had to leave through the front of the bar. I tried to explain to him that there was a guy up there that had tried to attack me, but he wouldn't listen. Or he just tuned it out, or thought I was just some drunk girl. Thankfully, my friend and I managed to get the attention of a few other people we knew, and we headed out the front as a group. I didn't see the guy anywhere, but I was terrified of getting through the parking lot. I just knew that he could be out there hiding somewhere. My friend and I ran as fast as we could, dove into the car, and she pulled out of the parking space before I could even get my seatbelt on. Creeper dude was nowhere to be seen. I checked the news the next day to see if there had been any other attacks, or God forbid, murders in the area, but there was nothing. I don't really remember much of his features, or what he was wearing, or how he sounded, but I will never forget the emotionless, blank, or matter-of-fact way that he stated that he killed people, and the way his dark eyes stared at me like I was prey. I never went back to that bar ever again. This happened when I was at college, so I was around 17 or 18 at the time. I've become friends with two guys in the music class. I studied drama, and used to go over to one of their houses after college sometimes to drink or just hang out or whatever. These guys are called Terry and Dave. It was Dave's flat I could go over to occasionally. I would also bring another female friend or two of mine. Terry and Dave were a bit out of my league in terms of life experience, if you will. I knew they regularly did drugs, slept around, and at that age, I really hadn't done any of those things, but I was good at making it seem as though I had. I had a crush on Terry, and he also fancied me. He was forever trying to get me to sleep with him. Looking back on it, he was actually a bit too pushy. But I could laugh him off and scale things back whenever flirting turned to anything more. Anyways, this particular night, I had planned to stay over the night at Dave's, as he only lived a 10-minute walk from the college. It was easier than having to get the bus home at 5 p.m., which would only give me a couple of hours to hang out. On the way to his flat, I bumped into a couple of old school friends of mine who also went to college, Kirsten and James. Kirsten told me that she and James had both missed the bus and weren't sure how they were going to get home. I said that I was on my way to Dave's. James was in the same class as Dave, so I knew that he would be welcome. And Kirsten had a vagina, so I knew that she also would be welcomed. So they came along with me. At Dave's, we all went to his room and started drinking, listening to music and such. I noticed throughout the evening that Terry was flirting a lot with Kirsten, and she was reciprocating, which pissed me off quite a bit, because Kirsten was actually aware that I liked Terry, and that although we weren't a couple, there was something going on between us. All night I tried to keep myself in between them, but it was difficult. At one point, Dave popped his head around the corner and to say hello. Dave's mom and dad were very liberal. They knew that he did drugs and allowed him to have people over. Basically let him do whatever he wanted. Naturally, at 17 and 18, we all thought that this was great. Anyways, his dad stood chatting for a little while with all 5 of us, but I noticed that his eyes kept going towards me. Eventually he left, and Dave went to grab more beers from the kitchen. When Dave came back, he was laughing, and he told me that his dad had said that he could see me with a whip and chain. I laughed it off, but I found it really odd. Now at the time, I was what you would probably call a goth. I had long, black hair, very dark eye makeup, white powder on my face, so I knew the comment probably related to that. But still, I was only 17, and his dad was well into his 50s. I let that go and carried on with the evening. At some point, we ran out of booze, and Dave suggested a trip to the 24-hour supermarket, which was only a 5-minute walk away. Dave and James offered to go, and I immediately realized that if I also went, it would leave Terry and Kirsten alone. Terry clearly also realized this as he started encouraging me to go. I refused and stayed in the room while Dave and James went to the shop. For whatever reason, I can't remember why, when Dave and James got back, I left the bedroom for a few minutes. Dave, James, and I were in the living room, and Terry and Kirsten were in the bedroom. When Dave went back into his room, he came straight out and said, "They're shagging." It had taken them all about 5 minutes. I was massively pissed off, and I didn't want to go back into the room at all, so I stayed in the living room with James. At some point, Dave's dad came into the living room, sat on the sofa, and then opened up his laptop. He made small talk with James and I, but then continued on with whatever he was doing. It got late, and James said that he was going to the bedroom to sleep. He tried to encourage me to come, but I refused, being stubborn. Said I would sleep on the sofa. James said something along the lines of, "You can't sleep out here," and glanced over at Dave's dad. He overheard and assured us that he would be going to bed in a few minutes anyways. James did try a couple of times to persuade me, but eventually gave up and just went to bed. I wasn't a silly girl. I was very street smart. I didn't put myself in dangerous positions. The way I saw it was, this man's wife was asleep in the next room, and 5 other people were only a few feet away in Dave's room. I didn't feel anything amiss, and I went to sleep right away on the sofa. I woke up an hour or so later to the sound of Dave's dad snoring louder than I'd ever heard a human being before, asleep on the other sofa. He obviously hadn't made it to bed. I would have been happy to just stay where I was and try to fall back to sleep, but then he started yelling in his sleep. Just yelling. "I'm gonna kill you, you fucking bitch. Get down there, you bitch." Words to that effect over and over again. It was creepy, but not downright scary. I did lay there crying, though, because I really just wanted to go home to my own bed. I completely regretted staying, but it was in the middle of the night, and there was nothing that I could do. I'd laid there for about another half an hour, listening to Dave's dad hollering, and eventually he woke himself up. He stood up and started clattering around in the kitchen, making himself a cup of tea or something. I pretended to be asleep to avoid a conversation, but either he knew I was awake or he deliberately tried to wake me by saying loudly, "I didn't mean to disturb you. Do you want a cup of tea?" I figured there was no point in ignoring him, so I just sat up and said, "Yes, please." As he made me the tea, I had a sudden idea. If I could find out what time the earliest bus came, I could be out of there and back home before any of the others even realized that I was gone. This was before the days of easy internet access on your phone, so I just asked Dave's dad if I could borrow his laptop. I lied and said that my parents were away on holiday and they were coming back early that morning. I said they would flip if I wasn't home, and I needed to beat them to it. I didn't want to tell him the real reason, I just wanted to get the fuck out of there. He said I was welcome to use his laptop, but that he would happily give me a lift home if he didn't want me getting into trouble with my parents. I can't tell you how out of character it was for me to just say yes. I am one of the most anxious, security, and safety-obsessed people you will ever meet. I never put myself in dangerous positions. I don't walk home alone at night. I always tell someone where I'm going. I'm going to assume that for whatever reason, I just wasn't in my right frame of mind when I accepted his lift. I didn't even think about this. It wasn't until I was strapped into his car, driving along deserted roads at 5 a.m., that I actually realized what I had done. I woke up to the fact that he could literally take me anywhere, and no one would ever know. My friends, all asleep, assumed that I was in the living room. My parents had no idea where I was. I stayed out so often that they stopped asking me, and didn't require me to check in with them, which is stupid now that I look back on it. I felt the panic rise in me, as I kept up mindless small talk while simultaneously giving directions, and praying that he followed them. I was on alert, waiting for him to take a wrong turn. I was slyly checking the doors, seeing if there was any way that I could jump out if I needed to. I kept a hand on my seatbelt buckle, just in case I needed to undo it quickly. He followed my directions right up to the road, just before my parents' house. "It's the next right," I told him, but he pulled up at the curb on the wrong street and shut off the engine. I swear to God that my heart nearly burst out of my chest. I looked at him. He looked at me. "It's just the next street over," I told him. "Just around that corner." He held my gaze for a moment too long before he started chuckling. He apologized and started the engine, eventually dropping me off safe and sound at my house. I realize that all of this is a little anticlimactic, but it definitely could easily not have been. Like I said, it was very out of character for me, but that moment of lapse in judgment could have been much worse than it actually was.
My freshman year of high school, I had no friends and was super impressionable. I was desperate for friends and a stupid romantic, so I believed a lot of crazy stuff. Think Twilight, making believe vampires were real. I don't remember how I came across this group, but I eventually met a group of kids who claimed to be Wiccan, and that they were reborn werewolves. They said I was one of the pack, so being desperate, I believed them wholeheartedly. But they played me. Finding out I was a hopeless romantic desperate, for some guarantee that I could find love, and use that. They said I had a husband in my last life, someone I was super close to, and that he would be reincarnated as well. I was over the moon. I had someone out there who had to love me. So I stayed, did what they asked, and generally acted as their pet from my freshman into sophomore year. Whenever I showed signs of wanting to leave, they would tell me stories about my husband, how he was rich and kind. It kept me there way longer than I should have been. I don't blame them. They were not doing it maliciously. They just wanted me to be their friends. One of the girls from the group had theater class with me. She was a bit big, but we became quick friends. But pretty early on, our relationship was off. She didn't like when I talked to my middle school friends, tried to make friends outside of her in theater, and would bad talk anyone I liked. It didn't hit me then, but this was her trying to corner me. One night, she invited me over for a sleepover. She said we could use some magic to find my husband. I couldn't say no. I showed up at her house. I think we watched movies for a bit, then we went to her room. She pulled out a box with a thin jar of pink dust, turned out to be pixie stick, and a razor blade. She handed me both and told me, "You need to cut yourself and drip it onto the dust. It will be the catalyst to find your love." I was freaked out. I hated pain. But my dumbass wanted to find my Prince Charming. So I ended up picking at an old scab after I couldn't bring myself to actually cut myself with a razor. She shook the dust, said some nonsense stuff, then ate the pixie dust with my blood on it. I was obviously disgusted. She said he was still in the spirit world, not reincarnated yet, which scared me. She then said, "Don't worry, I can have his souls take over my body, and you two can talk." She pretended to get possessed. We talked for a few moments, then she tried to kiss me. I was not comfortable with that at all. She kept trying to do so through the night, saying she was my husband, so it was normal. She also tried to touch me multiple times in uncomfortable places, and I thought a few times of leaving. But she said her parents were asleep, so if I left, she said they would get angry at her. Finally, I said I was tired. I decided to curl up on the floor and sleep out the night, then leave first thing in the morning. She said that we would be sleeping with her in her bed. I was so scared. I gave every excuse I could think to not sleep in her bed. She dismissed them all. She made me sleep on the side towards the wall, cutting me off from an escape. I stayed up most of the night, staring at the wall, praying she didn't do anything to me. I don't know if she ever did. I forced myself to sleep after a few hours. I woke up first, something I did since I was little at sleepovers, and I called my mom to get me immediately. I snuck out, left a bunch of my stuff, things I brought to play with her, and left. I didn't tell anyone. When I saw her next, she acted like nothing happened. She didn't refer to any of it again, and she continued to be my friend because I didn't believe anything had been wrong, because no one else reacted to it. When the senior kids left, it was just her and I. She got openly more toxic to other people in theater, and by proxy, so was I. Eventually, she was sick one day, and I made other friends. They helped me get away, or gather the courage to not be with her. When I told her I didn't want to be friends, she threw a fit and spread a bunch of rumors about me around. I had trouble making friends in the theater after that. I am in college now. I saw her once after high school. I didn't want to stay when we met with a mutual friend. I have problems sleeping in the same bed as other people, even if they are friends or siblings. I have problems staying overnight with people and getting too close to most girls, even though I am pan. I told my most recent partner, and he was very understanding. He worked with me to get over my fear of sleeping in the same bed with him.
I began attending a goth club, and there are events that happen a couple of times a week. My two best friends are there all the time, so I decided that I would start going out more and make more than my only two friends. So I did. It was all going really well. I had some people come up to me, and I started chatting with them. One night I kept noticing a goth boy in makeup and platform boots. He seemed to always be somewhere nearby me. He approaches me to say hi, and I ask if we know each other. He says, "Yeah, you're Brad's girlfriend, right?" I replied, "Yes. Are you a friend of his?" He laughs and says, "Well, sort of. We have the same ex." I told him that it was nice meeting him and ran off to rejoin my friends. The next week I go, and he's there again. Says hello when he sees me. I didn't get his name last time and figured that I would ask him this time. After we say hi, I ask him for his name. He says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I was drinking last time. I should not have brought up my ex Jessica. But my name is Michael." I tensed hearing her name, and she still openly admits to having feelings from Brad and has tried to make advances from the moment that we started dating. I trust my boyfriend, but I have very strong dislike for Jessica. I said, "Oh, so your mutual ex is horrible?" He nodded. "Yeah, be careful with Jessica. She's a dangerous one." He talked a bit more about her, mostly about how manipulative she was. I wrote him off as being harmless, and we finished our conversation. Didn't speak again for the rest of the night. Over the next couple of months, I'm there every week. But out of the blue, so is Michael. He hadn't been someone that was a regular there, but I wasn't really feeling paranoid about it just yet. I thought that he was trying to make some friends here. I told myself that it would be irrational to think that he was there for anything else, so I chose to ignore it. One evening, Jessica calls Brad as he and I were relaxing outside. She wanted to see how he's doing. They were friends long before dating, and I trust Brad, so I won't tell him who he can't talk to. He has a pretty short conversation, then he hangs up the phone. I told him, "Oh, that reminds me, I met one of her exes the other day." He laughs it off and asks me which one. I told him his name was Michael. All the color had drained from his face. "Did you say that you met Michael? What happened?" Feeling panicked by his reaction, I told him that Amy and I were at the club one night, and he asked if I was your girlfriend. My boyfriend freaks out, so he's about to have a panic attack. And I'm trying to calm him down when I finally get him calmed down. He explains that before Jessica dated him, Michael was with her and was abusive towards her. He always waited for her to leave and followed her, recording everything, what she was doing, how it made him feel, filming all the things that she did throughout the day. He also recorded about how he was sorry for cheating on her, telling her about the two girls that he cheated on her with, a 14-year-old girl and a 15-year-old, and he was 32 years old at that time. It was already odd that he was a 32-year-old dating an 18-year-old and cheated with underage girls. When Jessica dated Brad, he started following Brad around. Michael followed them, recording about both of them. Then Michael waited for Jessica and Brad to be at her house. He left this videotape at her doorstep. Brad begged her to go to the police, but she refused. Brad broke off things with her due to it, and a while later we met and ended up dating, but Michael had never stopped stalking Brad. We found out that he had added Amy, mine and Brad's close friends, and on her Facebook there are lots of pictures of us together, which is how I was found. I'm open to social media about where I am, and I'm sure that Michael saw pictures of me at the club, so he must have figured that that would be a great place to find Brad or Jessica. I started looking back through photographs from the events, and I'm finding him in the background of many of the photos. He played the shy, awkward card, and I fell for it. I talked to a few people that I know. They all said that they saw him and thought that he was a mutual friend of mine or something. I somehow was so oblivious. I didn't even realize that he had been stalking me, following me through the club, appearing everywhere that I was. I am also afraid to get back to that club. I'm afraid to leave my house. I wonder if he knows where I live. He must if he is following Brad and Jessica around. I haven't left my boyfriend's house since I found out. I'm afraid to be home alone. I obviously won't be going back to that club for a while. I've had many encounters with creepy men, and this happened when I was 15 years old. I was depressed as a teen and went off after school. At first, I was just in my neighborhood, and then I went about an hour out of my neighborhood. I always make my way home before dark and had my flip phone if I needed to call my parents. I always felt safe in the busy area. It always had tons of people on the road. One evening, I was on my way home, taking a 40-minute walk before I got there. A car pulled up in front of me at a parking lot, making me stop to let them make a turn onto the road, but the driver just rolled down his window. A 40-year-old man was in the driver's seat, asked me how I'm doing. I didn't know what to say to him. I had hoped that he would just want directions. "I'm okay. How are you?" before I could say anything else. He said that I love your style. Goth girls are my fetish. This man was pretty bold, and I wasn't sure how to react to it. Before I could say anything, a car pulled up behind him, meaning he now was blocking a car. "You got a car behind you," I told him. He replied with, "Meet me in the next parking lot." Before I could tell him no, that I needed to go home, he just drives away. I hoped that he was not serious, so I kept on walking, and there he was waiting. He was standing next to his car, waving at me, trying to flag me down. He was now following me, and I was scared to make him angry. I did not want him to follow me home. I looked around, and noticed some men sitting on a patio nearby, and knew that they could hear me if I screamed. I thought about my choices of going to see him or walking down a hill. I should have just pretended that I was on the phone with my mom or my dad. I don't remember anything about the conversation with him. I just kept my distance, so I didn't get kidnapped. This man walks to the back of his trunk. I started to tense up as he pulls out some black woman's boots that were laced up, maybe about size 9. "Aren't they nice?" he asked me. "Yeah, I guess," I replied to him. I am stunned when he asked me to try them on for him. I definitely can't believe that this is happening. "I'm a little young for you," I tell him. "No, you're not. You're like 20, right?" "No," I tell him. "I'm 15 years old." He suddenly goes white and says, "Oh, I made a mistake." He closes the trunk and says, "You're so hot," and I know I shouldn't say this to a 15-year-old. He drives off at a crazy speed as I walk away gracefully. Why was he carrying around those with him? How many women did he stop? What the fuck just happened? I wonder what would have happened if I was 18 and what his reasoning was for everything. I believe me being older now, he would have been more insistent with me, and I hope that I never meet that man again.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.